Welcome to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we are walking through a case that it perfectly captures this tension, this pull between wanting freedom and, well, the stark reality of being vulnerable. I want you to just picture this scene for a moment. Pensacola Beach, Florida. It's August, so it's hot. The air's thick with salt, and you've got that constant sound of the Gulf waves washing over the sand, white sand, sunshine. It's usually a place of peace.
Definitely. And it was a place that 25-year-old Tiffany Daniels really loved.
Yeah.
And that serene image, that peaceful backdrop, it just makes what happened on August 12th, 2013 all the more chilling, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because that idyllic setting, it suddenly became the stage for one of Florida's most baffling, most enduring missing persons cases. Tiffany Daniels just vanished, seemingly into thin air. She left behind her car, all her belongings, and a whole host of forensic questions that are still confounding investigators and, the online communities, even now, over a decade later.
So our goal today is to really unpack the timeline of her disappearance. We need to scrutinize the strange collection of evidence that was left in her abandoned car and explore these competing theories that have emerged. Everything from, a voluntary spiritual retreat to the really terrifying possibility of organized foul play, maybe linked to a major interstate corridor.
Right. We really want to explore what the evidence might suggest about her agency in all this. Was Tiffany choosing her own path that day, or was she somehow forced onto it by someone else?
Exactly. It's a story just full of paradoxes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every clue seems to just open up another door, another question. So let's try to walk through the source material and see what we can piece together.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with Tiffany herself, because I think to really grasp the mystery, you have to have some sense of the person who vanished. Tiffany Daniels, born back in 1988.
Yeah, and everyone who knew her consistently described her as deeply creative. An artist, free spirit, adventurous.
She worked as a theater technician at Pensacola State College, right? So using those creative skills.
She did, yeah. But the sources suggest she was always drawn more powerfully towards nature, towards the potential for new experiences, maybe something beyond the day-to-day job.
She was only 25 when she disappeared.
Yeah.
And it sounds like while her life had a lot of energy, there was also significant strain.
That definitely come through. I mean, she was wrestling with that classic artistic struggle, wasn't she? You have this spontaneous, open heart, this desire for freedom, but then you have the concrete, sometimes really difficult financial realities hitting you.
Right.
We know she was restless, and the sources mention she often covered rent for housemates who were struggling themselves, which, is generous, but it led to her own pretty intense financial pressure.
Okay, so that context, high-spirited, creative, but also financially stressed, that feels pretty vital when we look at her last known day. Monday, August 12th, 2013. She worked a full shift.
Everything seemed normal, apparently, until around 4:43 p.m., just as she was getting ready to leave work. She spoke to her supervisor.
And this is the first really odd thing. She told him she needed a week off for personal reasons.
Yeah, and that request, it's the first major sort of psychological puzzle piece we hit. Why just a week? If she was planning to completely disappear, cut ties, why not just quit the job?
Or, flip side, if she was totally overwhelmed and needed some dramatic escape right then, why put a return date on it at all?
Exactly. It feels temporary. And her friends, her family, they immediately flagged this request. They said it was profoundly uncharacteristic for Tiffany.
And their skepticism, it wasn't just a feeling, it was rooted in her actual plans, right?
Yeah.
Things she had lined up in the near future.
Precisely. I mean, if you're planning to run away and start a whole new identity, you probably wouldn't be so actively engaged in your current social life. She was actually scheduled to host a swing dance party pretty soon after that.
Okay, that speaks to community involvement, being connected.
Right. And she also had solid plans, tickets maybe, to visit her boyfriend down in Texas very soon. These are tangible commitments. They argue pretty strongly against the idea that she just woke up that Monday morning and decided, okay, I'm vanishing permanently.
Okay, let's really try to nail down the timeline for that evening. Step by step, piecing together her last known movements. She leaves work around 4:43 p.m.
Then internet history, browser logs and such, they suggest she did go back home, but only briefly, sometime between, say, 4:43 and 7:51 p.m.
And this stop at home, it's really ambiguous, isn't it?
Highly ambiguous. Her housemate was actually home at the time, But remarkably, they didn't see or speak to Tiffany at all during that period.
That's strange in itself.
It is, and we know she left the lights on when she finally departed the house, which could suggest one of two things, really. Either she intended to come back quickly.
Or her departure was sudden, rushed, maybe interrupted.
Exactly. Did she go home intending to pack a small bag for that week-long trip she mentioned? Or did she just run in to grab a couple of things before something or someone unexpected intervened? We just don't know.
And then we hit this critical point, the objective evidence, security footage. At 7:51 p.m. that same evening, her car, a gray 1999 Toyota 4Runner, it's recorded crossing the toll booths at the Bob Sykes Bridge.
And we need to stress, this is the only road that accesses Pensacola Beach proper. To get to where her car was eventually found, you absolutely had to cross that bridge. There's no other way by car.
But here's the absolute core issue, the fracture in the timeline, as you called it.
Yes. While the car is clearly seen crossing onto the beach area, the identity of the person driving, it remains explicitly unknown.
We just can't tell from the footage.
No. And that single fact, it fundamentally changes how we have to view every single piece of evidence that follows. Because if Tiffany was driving, then she went willingly to the beach that evening.
But if someone else was driving her car,
Then she may have already been incapacitated or coerced or worse before they even reached the bridge. Without knowing who was behind the wheel at 7:51 p.m., every subsequent action leaving the car where it was, locking it, all of it is cast into doubt. We don't know whose actions those were.
so 8 agonizing days go by.
Yeah.
No word from Tiffany, no sign of her. Then on August 20th, 2013, her 4Runner is finally discovered.
Abandoned. And the location is really telling. It's found in the very last public parking lot at Park West, which is near Fort Pickens. This is a remarkably remote, pretty isolated stretch of beach area, not a place you casually end up unless you intend to be there.
And the scene inside and around the car, you described it as a central paradox.
That's what jumps out to crime analysts. Yeah, because on one hand, the vehicle was locked.
Okay.
No damage, no forced entry, no signs of vandalism. It suggests, on the surface, a peaceful abandonment. Someone just parked it and walked away.
But on the other hand, inside the car were her absolute essentials, things you need to function.
Exactly. Her purse, her wallet with ID and cash, her cell phone, also some clothing, a jug of water, and even a jar of peanut butter. These are items for sustenance, for identity. To just walk away from all of that, it feels like an immediate declaration, like severing all ties instantly.
Right. Behavioral analysts often point to ditching the phone and wallet as that signature move, don't they? Someone seeking a true escape, trying to cut the electronic leash, the financial leash, immediately.
They do. But then, why lock the car? If you're making a clean break, why preserve the evidence inside? And more practically, why strand yourself without keys? It doesn't quite track logically for a planned voluntary escape.
That contradiction, that's why law enforcement couldn't just write this off as a simple runaway case, I imagine.
Precisely. And the forensic clues they found inside the vehicle, they only deepened the mystery about who was in control, about agency. Investigators found 2 distinct, unidentified fingerprints on the car.
Unidentified meaning.
Meaning they did not match Tiffany herself, they didn't match any of her family members or any known friends who might have innocently been in the car recently.
So this confirms, without a doubt, that at least 1, maybe 2, unknown individuals had some kind of interaction with that vehicle before it was officially found.
Absolutely. It proves third-party contact.
Okay, let's focus on this bicycle detail for a second, because the source material is really specific about it, and it feels like it could speak volumes about potential scene staging. Her bike was found inside the SUV.
Yes, stowed inside. And it had sand on the tires and the frame, which strongly suggests it had been recently used, likely ridden on the beach or maybe the trails around Park West.
Okay, makes sense. But the key thing here is what wasn't found, right?
Exactly. This is where the lack of evidence becomes evidence itself. The sources are very clear. There was no sand found on the car floorboards. Not on the driver's side, not on the passenger side.
So think about it. If Tiffany had ridden her bike on the sandy beach, then put it back inside the SUV herself, and then got back into the driver's seat or even the passenger seat,
She would almost certainly track sand on her shoes. Especially near a beach like Fort Pickens, it gets everywhere. You can't avoid it.
so the sand on the bike, but the clean floorboards. That suggests a very specific sequence of events, doesn't it?
It really does. It implies she or someone rode the bike. But the person who then put the bike into the SUV and locked the car was not the person who had just been riding it in the sand.
Meaning it suggests Tiffany herself was prevented from re-entering the vehicle after the bike ride.
That's a strong inference, yes. If she didn't get back in the car, then the locking of the car, the careful placement of her essential items inside, it all starts to point quite strongly towards a third party manipulating the scene, maybe staging it to look like a voluntary disappearance.
And that staging theory, it seems to align pretty well with the final key piece of evidence from that discovery scene, the witness sighting of this mystery man.
Right. Several residents in the area reported seeing an unidentified white male hanging around the Forerunner in the days before it was officially discovered by police.
They gave a description.
Yeah, fairly consistent. White male, maybe 30s to 40s, wearing distinctive red shorts. One witness specifically recalled seeing him near the parked SUV with the liftgate open.
The liftgate up, as if he was doing what? Getting something out? Or maybe putting something in?
Or, perhaps more chillingly, carefully arranging her belongings inside the purse, the wallet, the phone before locking it all up and walking away, making it look like she left it.
Okay, so let's just quickly synthesize this initial batch of evidence. We've got an uncharacteristic request for time off work. We have an unknown driver crossing the bridge onto the beach. We find a locked car days later in a remote spot containing all her ID and essentials. 2 unidentified fingerprints inside. A bicycle with sand, but no sand on the car floor. And a mystery man in red shorts seen near the vehicle before it was found.
Yeah, when you lay it all out like that, it moves far, far beyond any simple runaway scenario, doesn't it?
It really does.
What really stands out to me from an analytical perspective is the potential deliberate effort to create confusion. If there was a perpetrator, they chose a remote location, they made sure the vehicle was locked, and they left behind items that typically signal a voluntary walk off the phone, the wallet.
Trying to muddy the waters.
Exactly. But maybe they failed to account for those tiny forensic details, the fingerprints that didn't belong, and that subtle but crucial differential sand pattern. Those details might just betray the attempt to stage the scene.
Right, so given this really complex, almost contradictory set of evidence, it's really no surprise that the online community, and frankly local investigators too, have struggled to land on one single definitive explanation for what happened.
Not at all. The ambiguity is baked into the case from the start.
Let's maybe explore the voluntary scenarios first, starting with that idea of a sort of spiritual retreat or maybe just running away.
Well, this theory really draws its strength entirely from what we know about Tiffany's personality. Her reputation for being spontaneous, artistic, a free spirit. It certainly makes the idea of her seeking a fresh start or maybe going off-grid for a spiritual retreat seem plausible on the surface.
And we mentioned her financial stress earlier.
Right. For someone feeling overwhelmed by debt, maybe feeling burdened by obligations from housemates, the idea of just disappearing into a new life structure, perhaps finding an artist's commune or some isolated community, you can understand the motivational pull behind that, can't you?
Yeah, I can see the appeal. And then, of course, there was the initial, much grimmer hypothesis, just based on where the car was found, right near the Gulf. Accident or suicide?
Yes, absolutely. The car's proximity to the water immediately suggested drowning, either accidental or intentional. But, and this is a big but, authorities conducted really extensive searches.
Ground crews, air searches.
Ground crews, aerial sweeps, marine units searching the water and coastline. They covered miles of dunes, marshlands, tidal areas, and they found absolutely no trace of her body.
Which doesn't definitively rule it out, I guess, in such a vast area.
It doesn't definitively rule it out, no. The Gulf is huge, the currents are strong, but the complete lack of recovery, combined with all the strange, potentially staged circumstances surrounding the car itself, it has led investigators to generally, though maybe not completely, deprioritize simple accident or suicide as the primary theory. They have to keep an open mind, but the evidence points elsewhere more strongly.
Okay, so that brings us to the next category of theories, the much darker ones involving foul play. The isolated location near Fort Pickens, those unidentified fingerprints, the description of the man near the car. It all points pretty strongly towards abduction or assault, doesn't it?
It does, and what makes this possibility particularly tragic, if it's true, is how it intersects with her personality. Friends consistently describe Tiffany as a very trusting person.
A free spirit open to people.
Exactly. And a free spirit who trusts easily, who might be open to conversation with strangers.
Well, that's sadly the exact profile that a malicious actor, a predator, might actively seek out for exploitation or harm.
So you can imagine a scenario where she was approached in the parking lot, maybe on the beach.
Easily. Perhaps by the man in the red shorts, or maybe even someone she knew casually but didn't suspect. Her trusting nature could have rapidly become a devastating liability in that situation. Maybe she stopped to help someone, or accepted an offer of a ride, or just got drawn into a conversation, and never had the chance to realize her mistake before it was too late. This foul play theory, it really gained significant traction, didn't it? Because of one specific, incredibly detailed tip that kind of shifted the focus away from just the local beach. It pushed the case onto a much bigger national stage, suggesting the terrifying possibility of organized human trafficking.
This is the I-10 tip.
Ah, yes, the I-10 tip. This one is really unique in the annals of missing persons cases because it's not just some vague, I thought I saw someone who looked like her kind of sighting. This tip involved multiple, detailed, and apparently verifiable behavioral identifiers that were later confirmed by Tiffany's own mother.
Okay, break that down for us. Where did the tip come from?
It came from a waitress working in Metairie, Louisiana. Now, Metairie is right outside New Orleans, and it's a major stop along Interstate 10. And I-10, as the source material points out, is a known corridor for human trafficking. Just because of the sheer volume of transient traffic, the network of truck stops, motels, it facilitates movement.
Okay, so the location is significant. But what about the sighting itself? Why did it resonate so strongly with the family and investigators? Well, the waitress reported seeing a woman who strongly matched Tiffany's physical description. This woman wasn't alone. She was with two other women and an older Hispanic man. What initially caught the waitress's attention was the woman's specific behavior at the table.
What was she doing?
First, the woman kept covering her hands while she was sitting there, just sort of holding them together, maybe under the table or in her lap. When Tiffany's mother heard this detail, she immediately confirmed that was a distinct habit Tiffany had. She did it when she felt cold or nervous or uncomfortable.
Wow, okay. That's very specific.
Very specific. Second, the woman asked the waitress a very particular, somewhat unusual question about the broth in a soup they offered. Again, when described to Tiffany's mother, she confirmed that this specific question, or type of question about food details, was another distinct verbal habit Tiffany had.
That's two specific confirmed habits.
Exactly. And then the third element, the waitress apparently mentioned the Tiffany Daniels missing person case in conversation with some colleagues within earshot of the table. And as soon as that happened, the entire group, the woman matching Tiffany, the other two women, and the man, they abruptly got up and left the restaurant without even finishing their meal.
That is incredibly suspicious. So you have a physical habit, a verbal habit, and then a suspicious reaction to the mere mention of the case. Altogether.
It paints a very compelling picture, doesn't it? Suggesting this was potentially Tiffany, perhaps under duress, maybe even subtly trying to signal something through those familiar habits.
And it connects her disappearance not just to a potential local tragedy on Pensacola Beach, but potentially to this vast anonymous criminal network that uses the interstate system.
Absolutely. And for the family, you can imagine this tip represents a powerful flicker of hope. It's a strong indication for them that she might have been alive, at least at that time, and maybe actively trying to communicate her identity or her distress, even if she was being controlled by captors. That's why Tiffany's parents have poured so much of their energy and advocacy efforts into pursuing the trafficking angle ever since.
Now, beyond these crime-focused theories, there was also, as you mentioned, some complex debate around Tiffany's psychological state leading up to her disappearance, specifically about her emotional well-being.
Yes, and we have to report this impartially. Some sources, including recollections from some close friends, did mention that in the period before she vanished, Tiffany seemed somewhat overwhelmed, perhaps experiencing mood swings. Now, this could potentially support a theory of a spontaneous decision to disappear due to mental distress or needing a break.
But the family disputes this interpretation.
Very firmly, yes. They strongly reject this view. They point to her inherent optimism, her creative energy, her concrete plans like the swing dance party and the trip to Texas as proof that she was forward-looking, engaged with life, and not planning self-harm or some kind of desperate flight due to internal struggles.
It really highlights how difficult it is, doesn't it? To truly know someone's internal state of mind when all we have left are these fragmented recollections and interpretations after the fact.
It's incredibly difficult. People are complex and memories are imperfect.
And throughout all these competing theories, all the uncertainty, the local community, and importantly, the online sleuths have kept the pressure on, haven't they? We see the Find Tiffany Daniels campaign signs, local art inspired by her.
Vigils, fundraisers. Yes. And we really cannot underestimate the role of organized online sleuthing in cases like this today. Platforms like Reddit, Facebook groups, they host thousands of users who essentially act as this continuous distributed cold case unit.
Analyzing footage, discussing tips.
Exactly. They dissect security footage frame by painstaking frame. They follow up on anonymous tips that come in like, there was a more recent, though totally unconfirmed tip suggesting she might have been seen in Northern California. Their dedication, their collective brain power ensures that cases like Tiffany's don't just fade away into dusty file cabinets. They provide new energy, new perspectives, and sometimes, albeit often unverified, potentially new lines of inquiry for official investigators to consider.
Okay, let's try to move into the analysis phase now. We've got this extraordinary, almost baffling set of contradictory facts laid out. The scene at the abandoned car, it really remains the ultimate paradox here. What does it actually signify when someone leaves their phone, their wallet, their ID, all their essentials, inside a locked car? It forces us to choose between these two narratives, voluntary escape or staged abduction.
Yeah, from a purely investigative standpoint, it's a tough call. When a phone and wallet are left behind, the default assumption often leans towards a desire to evade tracking, both electronic and financial. It looks like a clean slate effort,
Right, cutting the ties.
However, the fact that the car was securely locked, that the keys were missing from the scene entirely, and crucially, that we have those two unidentified fingerprints inside, that pushes the needle pretty heavily back towards external manipulation or third-party involvement.
Okay, hang on. Let me just push back on that slightly. If a perpetrator was trying to stage a voluntary disappearance, wouldn't they maybe have taken the phone and the money with the supposed victim to make it look like she was equipped to travel? Leaving behind all her essentials seems almost counterintuitive if you're trying to create a smooth, believable staging of someone just walking away.
That's an excellent point, and it really gets to the heart of debating the perpetrator's motive and sophistication, doesn't it? You could argue it either way. Maybe a less sophisticated perpetrator, or one acting quickly, simply locked the vehicle to delay discovery and make the initial scene ambiguous without thinking through all the implications.
Just lock it and run.
Maybe, conversely, a more calculating perpetrator might intentionally leave the ID and phone behind to deliberately establish a false narrative of a distressed, impulsive departure. See, she left everything, she must have just snapped and walked off. The fact that the bike was carefully stowed inside, yet the floorboards were clean of sand, that detail to me speaks more to a meticulous, thought-out staged effort rather than a panicked, spontaneous act by Tiffany herself. The staging itself, the care taken, could be the evidence of foul play.
And the mystery of the keys still hangs there. If she was abducted or if someone else ditched the car, where did the keys go?
The keys are such a crucial missing link. If a perpetrator drove the car to Park West, locked it, and then took the keys with them, well, they could have easily tossed them into the vastness of the Gulf or deep into the dense underbrush around Fort Pickens. Recovery would be almost impossible.
Gone forever.
Pretty much. The fact they were never found means they were either very effectively concealed by a perpetrator or, if you entertain the voluntary theory for a moment, she might have hidden them or tossed them away herself immediately after locking the car. But given the fingerprint evidence, the most plausible inference remains that the keys were removed from the scene by that unknown third party.
Let's talk about the law enforcement efforts. The Pensacola Police Department, you mentioned, has held on to that 1999 Toyota 4Runner for over a decade now. Why keep an old car in evidence lockup for so long?
Holding a vehicle like that is actually a fairly standard and smart strategy in complex cold cases, especially when the initial forensic technology available at the time of the crime was limited. They're essentially banking on the future.
Waiting for technology to improve.
Exactly. Specifically, they're likely waiting for significant advances in things like touch DNA technology and maybe more refined fingerprint processing techniques. Back in 2013, recovering usable DNA from just skin cells left behind on a surface or lifting a perfect print from a difficult surface was far less sensitive and reliable than it is today.
So the hope is,
The hope is that future technological breakthroughs will allow them to go back, reprocess those two unidentified fingerprints, perhaps finally get a usable DNA profile from the skin cells shed by whoever touched those spots, or maybe find microscopic fibers, hairs, or other trace evidence that wasn't detectable back then, which could finally link the vehicle and therefore the scene to a known individual in a database, or even just to a specific different location. That forerunner is essentially a time capsule, a frozen crime scene, just waiting for science to catch up and unlock its secrets.
it really brings us back to Tiffany herself, doesn't it? Her adventurous nature, her openness, which we noted was such a defining characteristic. How does that core part of her identity, that free spirit, simultaneously represent both her freedom and, tragically perhaps, her ultimate vulnerability?
It's a truly heartbreaking irony, isn't it? Her willingness to trust people, her openness to new experiences, her spontaneity. These are fundamentally positive, enriching human traits that we admire. They allow for connection and growth.
Absolutely.
But you take those same wonderful traits and put them in an isolated, potentially unsafe setting like Park West late in the evening or interacting with the wrong person, and suddenly that same openness might have lowered her natural guard significantly.
Made her less cautious than maybe she should have been.
Perhaps. She might have readily accepted an offer of assistance if someone feigned car trouble or agreed to a ride, or simply engaged in a casual conversation with someone like the man in the red shorts, thinking nothing of it because that's her nature, open and trusting. In a situation involving a predator, that very trust transforms instantly into a tragic liability. It grants access, creates an opportunity that a more inherently cautious or suspicious individual might instinctively deny.
And we can't ignore the geography here. The overwhelming complexity of that Gulf Coast environment must have hugely complicated the search efforts from day one.
Oh, immensely. The Gulf Coast geography around Fort Pickens is deceptively difficult terrain. You've got these isolated sand dunes that shift with the wind, areas of really dense, almost impenetrable protective scrub brush, and then these extensive, powerful tidal areas and marshlands. Water levels change constantly. Currents are strong.
So even ruling out something like accidental drowning is harder than it sounds.
Much harder. Because the sea is incredibly efficient at claiming and dispersing objects, including human remains. Things can be carried miles away or buried under shifting sands very quickly. The environment itself is incredibly effective at concealing things. So the lack of recovery, while leaning investigators away from accident, doesn't definitively confirm foul play either. It just means the vast, shifting, often inaccessible nature of that landscape makes it incredibly difficult to definitively confirm or deny any scenario that might involve the natural elements. The place itself holds secrets.
And finally, throughout this whole decade-plus ordeal, we absolutely have to acknowledge the incredible resolve of Tiffany's parents. They've simply refused to let this case go cold, refused to let her be forgotten.
Their dedication is, without exaggeration, the engine that continues to keep this case active and in the public eye. They are the primary driving force behind the Find Tiffany Daniels advocacy efforts. And critically, as we discussed, they focus heavily on pursuing that human trafficking theory, largely because of the compelling, specific details in that I-10 tip from Louisiana.
They won't accept the simple narratives.
No, their active pursuit, their constant pressure on law enforcement, their refusal to just accept a simple runaway story or an unexplained accident. It ensures that investigators and the wider community keep seeking answers, keep looking at any new lead. Their tireless work is a powerful reminder that this isn't just an intriguing puzzle or a collection of forensic clues. This is about a real person, a daughter, whose life was brutally interrupted and whose family deserves answers.
Tiffany Daniels' story. It really is one that symbolizes both that deep human desire for wanderlust, for freedom, and also the enduring haunting mystery that results when a person simply vanishes off the face of the earth, leaving behind only these strange, contradictory breadcrumbs. That meticulously locked car, the two unidentified fingerprints, that deeply disturbing I-10 tip suggesting coercion but also maybe communication. All these elements demand continued investigation, continued analysis, and continued hope for resolution. Next time on Threads of Truth, we travel to Alma, Arkansas, where 6-year-old Morgan Nick disappeared from a Little League game back in 1995. It's a case that absolutely reshaped child safety laws across America. and one that still haunts her hometown and the nation today.